She thought it was just another long, exhausting shift, like all the others. Another day of spilled coffee, endless refills, and the same old faces coming in and out. Clara had seen it all. A busy diner, late nights, and the same tired routine. But today was different. It started like any other, the clock ticking slowly, customers chatting, and the clink of plates filling the air. But then, as the bell over the door rang, something caught her attention. A figure entered, moving with an air of calm, blending into the hum of the diner. At first, he seemed like just another regular customer, nothing out of the ordinary. A man in casual clothes, maybe a businessman or just someone looking for a quick meal. But there was something about him, something that felt out of place, yet impossible to ignore. Clara didn't know it yet, but the man sitting at table 5 wasn't just another face in the crowd. It was Jeff Bezos, the name that had changed the world. But in that moment, to Clara, he was just another customer with an order to take. Little did she know, this seemingly ordinary interaction was about to set into motion a series of events that would turn her life upside down. What happened next would change everything, and it all started with a single, unnoticed gesture that no one could have predicted. Meet Clara, a woman with more on her plate than most could ever imagine. By day, she's a waitress at a bustling diner, her hands always moving, her mind constantly juggling the responsibilities of a single mother. By night, she's a mom, doing everything she can to care for her young child who's been sick for weeks. It's not easy. In fact, it's far from it. Every day, Clara faces the weight of the world on her shoulders. Bills pile up faster than she can pay them, and each night she goes to bed with a tired smile, wondering if tomorrow will be any different. But it never is. There's always another bill, another problem to solve, another sacrifice to make. Clara dreams of a life beyond the diner, of a future where she doesn't have to choose between her child's health and keeping a roof over their heads. She dreams of a day when the weight on her shoulders won't feel so heavy, when her heart can finally rest, when she can smile and mean it. But for now, the diner is all she has. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. But it's survival. Every shift, every plate served, is another small step toward keeping everything together. Clara's kindness shines through the exhaustion. She's a woman who believes in helping others, even when she's at her lowest. Her compassion is a beacon in a world that often feels too dark, and yet, there are moments when even her heart feels too full of burdens to carry. And then he walks in. Jeff Bezos, a man whose name everyone knows but who feels like just another customer here. To Clara, he's nothing more than a regular patron, someone who will sit down, eat his meal, and leave. She doesn't know who he is, and frankly, she doesn't care. She's too caught up in her world, too busy trying to keep everything from falling apart. He's just another face in the crowd. Just another customer. But little does Clara know, this day, this shift, is unlike any other. Tonight, destiny has other plans. It was the same old routine for Clara. Another day, another shift, another endless parade of customers. She moved through the diner with practiced efficiency, her feet aching, her mind a blur of orders, bills, and the constant ticking of the clock. Some customers were kind, offering a smile or a thank you, but others were anything but. Clara had learned to smile through the rudeness, the impatience, the demands that seemed to come without thought. She'd perfected the art of keeping her cool when customers snapped at her for the smallest things. I asked for no onions, or my coffee's too cold. The complaints never stopped. But Clara didn't mind. Not really. She'd heard it all before. She'd learned to tune it out, to turn the frustration into something she could manage. At least she still had her job. But sometimes, just sometimes, the weight of it all was too much. There was the woman who asked for her water with no ice, then immediately changed her mind and demanded it be extra cold. Clara could already feel the sigh building in her chest, but she plastered on that customer service smile, ready to oblige. Of course, no ice, extra cold, she said, holding back a chuckle. A little humor, she thought, could make the chaos feel a little less heavy. And then, there was Mr. Thompson, the regular who always sat at the same booth. He was a nice enough guy, but he never seemed to understand that Clara wasn't a mind reader. Today, he had one simple request, I need extra ketchup, not too much, but enough to cover the fries, you know? She had learned long ago to just nod, smile, and go with it. With every table she served, Clara was reminded of how far she was from the dreams she'd once had. The little things, the way the customers would chat with each other about their plans for the weekend, their vacations, their big dreams, only reminded her that her own aspirations felt distant, almost impossible. Was there ever going to be a way out of this cycle? Bills were piling up at home, her child still needed constant care, and she could barely keep her eyes open at night. Her heart ached for a break, a chance to breathe, to stop living paycheck to paycheck. She was stuck in this endless loop of stress, bills, and missed opportunities. She had to keep going. She had no choice. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between serving customers, she wondered if things would ever change. And all the while, as Clara went about her routine, serving another plate of food, refilling another drink, Jeff Bezos sat at the corner table, quietly observing it all. He watched her from a distance, the weight of his thoughts hidden behind his calm exterior. To Clara, he was just another diner in the sea of faces that passed through the door each day. But to him, Clara's resilience didn't go unnoticed. But in this world of chaos, where Clara was lost in the noise of everyday life, neither of them knew that today, this very day, would be the day that would change everything. Clara didn't know it, but her life was about to shift in a way she could never have imagined. As the minutes ticked by, she moved through her routine, her body heavy with exhaustion, her thoughts occupied by a million other things. Then there he was, Jeff Bezos, still sitting quietly at the corner booth. He hadn't asked for anything extraordinary, just a simple meal. A man who seemed like any other patron, enjoying his lunch without any demands. For Clara, it was just another order. Just another plate to serve. "What can I get for you?" she asked, offering the warm smile she always did, despite her weariness. "Just the usual," Bezos replied, his voice calm and unassuming. A few words that seemed too ordinary for someone who had changed the world, but Clara didn't know that yet. She brought him the meal, nothing special, just a simple sandwich and a drink. It wasn't the kind of order that stood out. She served it with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times before. There was no rush, no special attention. Just another meal. As he ate, Clara moved from table to table, serving food, refilling drinks, and checking on the other customers, her mind constantly racing. She was lost in her thoughts, thinking about her child, the bills, and how she was going to make it through the next week. But still, she kept moving, kept working, kept smiling. When Bezos was finished, he placed his napkin neatly on the table, and Clara walked over, her feet dragging with exhaustion. "Your check, sir," she said, offering it with the same polite smile. Bezos didn't hesitate. He picked up the check, glanced at it briefly, and then quickly scribbled something on the back, something Clara didn't see, something that would change everything. He placed the check face down, leaving it on the table. It was a quiet gesture, unnoticed by the busy waitress, who was already turning away to deal with her next customer. No fanfare, no dramatic pause. Just a simple action that would go unnoticed by almost anyone. And then, as quietly as he'd come in, Bezos stood up, left his tip, and exited the diner. He didn't say a word. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked out, blending back into the world that had no idea who he was. Clara didn't think twice. She didn't know that the note on that check was about to change everything for her. She finished her shift, exhausted and drained, her mind already back on her other responsibilities. The diner had been busy, the night long. She just wanted to go home and rest. But little did she know, while she'd been running around, trying to keep everything in balance, there was something waiting for her. A simple note that could turn her entire world upside down. The end of Clara's shift came, like it always did, quietly, with the sound of chairs scraping against the floor and the soft murmur of customers leaving. Exhausted, she moved to clear the last table, her tired body begging for rest. It had been a long day, and all she could think about was getting home to her child, to try and make sense of her never-ending responsibilities. She approached the corner booth, where Jeff Bezos had sat just moments ago, his absence now filled by a space that felt strangely quiet. She picked up the check he'd left, still face down, and as she turned it over, something strange caught her eye. It wasn't just a tip. There, written in simple, yet powerful handwriting, were the words, "I've been where you are. Believe in yourself. This is for your future." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The words themselves were enough to stop her in her tracks. Believe in yourself. She'd heard those words before, but never like this, never with such raw sincerity. She stared at the note, unable to process it. She had seen plenty of tips in her time, some generous, some barely enough to cover a cup of coffee, but this felt different. And then her eyes fell on the small, folded corner of the check, and her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, with trembling hands, she unfolded the paper and saw the number, $50,000. $50,000. The numbers blurred for a moment. It didn't make sense. She blinked several times, trying to make sense of what was in front of her, but her eyes betrayed her, filling with tears. Could this really be happening? Was this some kind of mistake? Maybe someone had left the wrong check behind. Maybe it wasn't meant for her. But the note was meant for her. Her hands shook as she held the check. The weight of it, both literal and emotional, was too much for her to comprehend. She looked around, as if expecting someone to jump out and explain that this was some kind of joke. But there was no one. No one except Clara, alone in her disbelief. The tears began to well up, spilling over onto her cheeks as her heart raced. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't process how this was possible, how someone, a stranger, could be so kind, so selfless. This wasn't just a check. It was a lifeline. It was the answer to every prayer she'd whispered, every worry she'd carried, every sleepless night spent wondering how she would make it through another month. The note, the money, it all hit her like a wave. Could it be real? The realization began to settle in, and as she sat there, shaking, staring at the check, something shifted inside her. This wasn't just a gift. This was a chance. A chance to change everything. To get out of the cycle, to finally breathe, to give her child the care they needed, to live without the constant weight of stress hanging over her. But Clara didn't know how to process the emotions swirling inside her. She could barely understand the magnitude of what was happening. A stranger had just changed her life, and in that moment, the world felt different, colder, yet warmer at the same time. The enormity of it all felt too big to grasp. She broke down, her hands gripping the check like a lifeline, as tears streamed down her face. It wasn't just gratitude. It was disbelief. It was joy, it was fear, it was wonder. How could someone, anyone, especially a stranger, be so kind? For Clara, this was the moment when the impossible became possible. And she couldn't quite believe it, not yet. As Clara sat there, still trembling, holding the check, something inside her began to stir. She couldn't help but wonder, who was this person who had seen her struggles, who had reached out in such a powerful way? And as she sat in stunned silence, something in her mind shifted, taking her back to the past. It wasn't just the check or the note that connected her to the stranger who had so unexpectedly changed her life. It was the story behind the words. And though she didn't know it yet, that story had a familiar ring to it. Clara's mind began to wander, and suddenly, she was transported to another time. The scene was different, less polished, more raw. It was a small garage, cluttered with boxes, papers scattered across a cluttered desk. She saw the silhouette of a young man, shoulders slumped from exhaustion, hunched over a computer. It was the kind of scene Clara knew all too well. The grind, the struggle, the feeling of being up against the wall. This was Jeff Bezos, years before he became the billionaire many knew him as today. Before the millions, before the tech empire. He wasn't sitting in a lavish office or making the big decisions from a penthouse in Manhattan. He was working late nights in that humble garage, surrounded by nothing but his dreams and doubts. The hours were long, and the future was uncertain. The weight of failure was real, pulling him down every single day. There were moments when the only thing that kept him going was the belief that maybe, just maybe, it would all pay off one day. But there were no guarantees. There was no fame. There were no signs of success in those early days. Just a relentless pursuit of something bigger, something better. But for every small victory, there was a mountain of challenges. For every breakthrough, there were 5 setbacks. He was often laughed at, dismissed as just another dreamer by those around him. But he kept pushing, refusing to let go of the vision he held so tightly. And through Clara's own quiet reflection, it became clear. The story of Jeff Bezos was more than just the story of a self-made billionaire. It was the story of anyone who had ever struggled, of anyone who had ever worked for something bigger than themselves. Clara felt the connection deep within her. She knew what it was like to feel like the odds were stacked against you, to feel small, to wonder if the sacrifices were worth it. And just like Bezos, there were days when she felt like giving up. Days when the weight of her struggles seemed too heavy to carry. But somewhere, buried deep beneath the exhaustion, she knew that one day, if she kept going, things would change. In Bezos' story, Clara saw her own reflection. She saw the late nights, the self-doubt, the hope that maybe, just maybe, if she could hang on, she too could make it through. His journey was a testament to the power of persistence, of believing when no one else believed. The struggles he had faced were not so different from hers. And just as he had pushed through, so would she. Clara wiped the tears from her eyes, realizing something profound. This wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the unexpected kindness of a stranger. It was the recognition that someone who had been where she was, understood her pain. Someone who had climbed from the bottom had reached out to her, not just as a benefactor, but as a kindred spirit. The people who succeed, Clara realized, are often the ones who have faced the darkest nights. They are the ones who have questioned whether the struggle is worth it. But the ones who persevere, who keep going even when it seems impossible, those are the ones who shine a light for others to follow. And in this moment, Clara knew Jeff Bezos hadn't just handed her money. He had handed her a lifeline, a reminder that it was possible to rise even after the hardest falls. He had left a light for her to find when she needed it most. And she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Days passed, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that her life had shifted into a new chapter. That check, those words, had set something in motion inside her. The weight she had carried for so long had begun to lift, bit by bit. And slowly, the pieces of her life started to fall into place, one by one. The first thing she did was take her child to the doctor. 4 months, they had lived with the uncertainty of whether the treatment her child desperately needed would ever be affordable. But now, with the money from the check, Clara didn't have to choose between her child's health and the bills that had piled up in front of her. It was the relief she had prayed for, the kind of relief only those who've been in her shoes could understand. She could already feel the weight lifting off her chest as her child received the care they needed. No more stressing over hospital bills. No more crying in the dead of night, wondering how she would find the money to make it all work. That part of her life, that struggle, was finally coming to an end. But Clara didn't stop there. She knew she had to build something lasting, something for herself. So, she paid off the debt that had been haunting her for years. Credit cards, bills, loans, all gone in one fell swoop. It was like she could finally breathe again, like a cloud had lifted from over her head. With the weight of financial stress finally behind her, Clara began to dream. She had always loved cooking, always dreamed of owning a small diner of her own, a place where she could create, connect, and share her love of food with others. It seemed impossible just a few weeks ago, but now she could see it. The first steps toward that dream weren't so far away. She began researching, planning, and setting her goals in motion. And with every new step, Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. She had been living in survival mode for so long, just trying to get through the next day. But now, it wasn't just about surviving anymore. She had a future. And it was bright, and it was full of promise. Still in shock, Clara sat down at her small kitchen table one evening, pen in hand, trying to write a letter. She had to reach out. She had to say thank you. But how could she possibly express the depth of her gratitude? How could words ever convey what this kind of kindness had meant to her? She wrote and rewrote, each sentence filled with tears as she poured her heart onto the page. Thank you didn't seem enough. There were no words that could truly encapsulate the transformation that had taken place in her life, the impossible feeling of hope that now burned inside her. She wasn't sure how to find him, how to make sure her letter reached the man who had given her more than just money. He had given her a chance. A chance to live again, to believe again. But she knew one thing for sure, she couldn't let this moment go without trying. No one had ever believed in her like this, not even her. And just like that, Clara realized that in a world full of noise, full of distractions, full of worries and doubts, sometimes, one act of kindness can silence all of it. It can quiet the self-doubt, the fear, the struggle. It can give someone back their belief in themselves. Clara's life was no longer about surviving. No, it was about living. It was about finding joy again, about believing that she deserved more than just to get by. She deserved happiness. She deserved love. And she deserved to chase her dreams, even if those dreams seemed impossible just a little while ago. But now, with a future that finally felt like it was within her reach, Clara knew one thing. There was nothing stopping her now. Clara stood behind the counter, her heart full as she watched her diner buzz with life. Laughter echoed through the room, and the familiar hum of busy conversations filled the air. It was a place she had dreamed of, a place where the simple act of serving a meal could make a difference. And now it was her reality. As she placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of a new customer, Clara couldn't help but smile. The weight of everything that had happened, everything that had changed, seemed to fade away for a moment. The diner was hers. The life she had always wanted, the peace she had longed for, was finally here. She stepped back for just a second, her eyes scanning the room filled with warmth and energy. She looked at the customers, at the people who now came to her for comfort, and felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a business, it was a dream, one that had come to life in ways she never could have imagined. She had fought so long just to survive, but now she was living. And then her gaze drifted upward, toward the sky. The sun was setting, casting a soft glow over the diner's windows. For a brief moment, Clara stood still, taking it all in. She thought about the days when it felt like she was stuck in a never-ending cycle, wondering if she would ever catch a break. She thought about the nights when hope seemed so distant when she couldn't even dream about a future. But life, she realized, had a funny way of changing when you least expect it. Sometimes, the smallest gestures, the ones that seem so insignificant at the time, have the biggest impact. A kind word, a helping hand, a note left behind on a check. These are the moments that can shift the course of someone's life forever. Clara had been that someone, lost in the noise, caught in the struggle. But through the kindness of a stranger, everything had changed. It was the push she needed, the belief she needed, and it had all led her to this moment. The truth was, life wasn't always going to be easy. There would still be challenges. There would still be setbacks. But in that moment, Clara knew one thing for sure, she had come so far. She had made it through the darkest days, and now she stood in the light, stronger and more determined than ever. As she took a deep breath and watched the people in her diner enjoying their meals, Clara couldn't help but think about how everything had come full circle. What had started as a moment of desperation had blossomed into a life full of purpose. And so, she moved forward, knowing that in the most unexpected moments, life could change forever. Sometimes, it only takes one person to believe in you, to give you the chance to believe in yourself. And that belief? That's what made all the difference. In the end, it wasn't about the money. It was about kindness. It was about finding hope when it seemed impossible. And for Clara, that hope had led her to this diner, to her own future, to a life full of possibilities. Now, we want to hear from you. Imagine yourself in Clara's shoes. What would you do if someone left you a note like this? How would it change your life? Would you pay it forward, or keep the kindness close to your heart? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your story could inspire someone else. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories that remind us all that sometimes, the smallest gestures can change everything.